Yes, but think too, you've got kind of two-part question there. You're talking about physical bodies, administrators, as opposed to administrative costs. In that administrative cost line is the internet, legal fees, phone bills, insurance. There's a lot of general administration costs in that cost. So if you wanted to know just particular positions, the best person to go to is the superintendent and ask for the numbers.
Let me just add a quick point on it. Is administration costs on average about 10% of the budget. It is not a huge figure, and also put this in some context of teacher accountability. And if we're going to be evaluating our teachers better, who's going to do those evaluations? So, you know, a bunch to weigh here. I think it's, as a superintendent recently said, the administration is an easy place to cut these days, but if we want better evaluation, it's, you know, these aren't computers doing this work. So,
and I also wanted to point out, we talked about. Can you hear me okay? Okay. I think a lot of people feel as if this, you know, that this process is open, and some believe it's not open. And people who believe the budget process is not open, many times are justified. Obviously, there seems to be a lot of stuff other than the statutory requirements, and hopefully those are at least being followed, that are going on behind closed doors. But one thing that you should recognize, and maybe this is my position as a school board attorney, is to try to put yourself in the shoes of board members and the administrators and understand about this process. And as Jean described, all the things that are sort of going on simultaneously with the election and the possible negotiations and considering the strategies that have to be used in dealing with the public, and all of this for the great fee of $0.00. It can be a really tough job. I know the administrators are getting paid quite well, and at least that's their perception. But remember that information is best gleaned through the Open Public Records Act, but not all information is public, especially budget information early on, where you're having these conversations. For example, a budget committee that's having a discussion and comes in with a proposal, somebody comes with another proposal, those are all protected under the advisory, consultative, and deliberative privilege. So I know you all sort of, you understand this generally, but in this process, just try to put yourself in the shoes of the administrators and keep in mind that, that there is some stuff that's required to be public, but others that is not.
Mr. Bush, I wanted to ask you, as an attorney for Board of Education, are the fees being paid to attorneys to protect lawsuits one of the things that you can make an open request for Board of Education?
Absolutely. Legal bills, just like any other vendor's bills, are public. I mean, the only thing that could potentially be redacted, for example, you may see some black, lining on any bills that you would request, and that's for student names. Although lawyers, should know better that does not include student names.
Okay.
Occasionally, something comes through with respect to strategy, but as a court once said with a case that discussed whether or not legal bills are public. Lawyers should know better than to put their strategy in legal bills. So generally speaking, they're public. It's just a matter of how much you can actually get once you get it.
So would you, in your open request, ask specifically for legal fees for lawsuits?
Well, when we're starting to get into Oprah, but just in general, so you have a strategy on this, don't ask for the information. Ask for the record. And I know for reporters, that might be tough, because reporters are used to asking information, you're used to asking questions. But the Open Public Records Act in New Jersey provides for record requests. It's not a required request for, require administrators to answer requests for information. So if you ask them, how many students are in your district, technically, they should try to comply and do their best to give you a document that reflects that information, but they're not to give you just a response. And many of them will, but if they ask us as their attorneys, how should we respond? We'll say, look, you got to work with them. The Open Public Records Act is designed to ensure open government, et cetera, et cetera. But don't get into a practice of creating documents for people as they ask you. You have too much going on in your offices, and when someone asks you a question more compound than just how many students in your district, you're going to have a secretary dedicated for 3 days trying to answer it. So just be careful as reporters, as members of the public, if you're making a request for information, make the request for the records that contains the information to the extent you know.
Ask for the last year's worth of bills.
Yeah.
Donna, and it is 12:30. I don't know if our panelists are on a tight crunch. We can go until they kick us out of the room. I don't want to cut off the debate, but it is 12:30, so we won't be offended if anyone has to leave if they're on time, but Donna?
I'd like to hear what the panelists think about how we as a hyperlocal news association can tackle a statewide issue like the reforms that were proposed by Christopher Surf, and whether there is a way that we can collaborate on that kind of coverage, whether we can feed some kind of statewide coverage of it, or the other way around, whether we can get some assistance in understanding the policy implications on a local level.
Well, I'd love to talk to you, Donna. You and I have spoken about ways to do that. I mean, I think one of Spotlight's whole notions is to provide coverage of these statewide issues, hopefully for local communities. And you are folks that we want to reach out to. And vice versa. I think there are ways that you can help us as well. These are issues that affect, especially around schools. These are statewide, state-centered issues that affect every single one of the communities. So I think there's a real possibility for collaboration there. I'd love to talk. I'd love to get anyone who's interested in that talk about it.
Lee?
As a member of the public and also involved with the Citizens Campaign, I think there has to be distinctions for the public as well as reporters too, between the budget process and the actual budget. I think people get hung up on that and trying to dig out information that the public can absorb. I mean, there's wonderful formats in the report cards, all that, but it's not easy to interpret. But as a citizen, the thing that I've come up against is the lack of knowledge of the rest of the board beyond the budget committee. In our town, we actually voted, and it was recommended by the New Jersey Board Association, to go to a committee of the whole. My purpose in supporting that was to see how many of the other board members even know what the hell they're voting on when it comes out of the Finance Committee. And I see that as a real problem.
Well, let me take it up to the legislature and Congress too. I mean, it's not just a local problem.
Yes, we also went to a committee of the whole, and I thought it was a good idea. I think what's important though is I don't think the public is generally informed, when I get questions, and other board members can speak to this, and you mentioned it before, the mandates. For instance, many of us are not anti-charter school. We're anti the way they're implemented, where you can just take my best students instead of taking a segment of the economic demographic that from the time you exist, and then say, let's compare apples to apples. Are you really performing at a better level? If you just want to take the top 10% of the students and say, look, we're doing better, well, yeah, you know what, I'll open a school tomorrow, give me the money, I can do that too, and I don't really have to have qualified teachers. So those type of things, I'd like you guys to speak about the mandates, and I am speaking as an individual, not as speaking for my board.
Where are you from?
I'm from South Brunswick.